You're listening to the Renegade Blitz, the best podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app.
And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Polk with Chris Ward and Brandon Walker. Glad to be with you to cover Steelers versus Vikings Thursday night football from Minneapolis, and we're glad to have on Will Ragatz, who covers the Vikings for Sports Illustrated. Will, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited for this game tomorrow night.
Absolutely. And, well, first we got to start off with the big story. The Steelers tied the Lions. It was, at that point, probably their closest chance to getting their first win of the season. And they just got it last weekend, coming off a last-second victory against the Vikings on Sunday. It was a throw from Jared Goff to Ahmad St. Brown, ended their long losing streak. And we know that Minnesota is and still is dealing with injuries, but can you tell us what happened, just in a brief, few words, what happened against Detroit?
Yeah, it was a really, really bad loss for the Vikings that has kind of sent this whole fan base into a panic, and Mike Zimmer's seat is very hot right now. Just a complete disaster, really. They got out to an early lead, but they couldn't convert on some red zone opportunities, so they were up 6-0 after a couple of field goals. And then things just kind of fell apart in the second quarter, and they were down 20-6 at the half. They just weren't playing good defense, and went for it on fourth down and missed it once, which gave the Lions another opportunity. And then, unsurprisingly, the Vikings battled back in it, because every Vikings game this year, it seems like, has come down to the very last play, and 11 of their 12 games have been decided by one score. So you were expecting it, but they took a late lead, and then just a really bizarre final drive where Jared Goff had to go 75 yards in less than 2 minutes with no timeouts. And the Vikings decided to play prevent defense and not really pressure him at all, and just kind of let him chip away down the field. And then I'm sure everybody's seen that final play, and their cornerbacks are playing halfway deep in the end zone when you just can't give up the goal line, and an easy touchdown pass, and they lost. And yeah, just not a great look for Zimmer's defense, but the entire group as a whole. A lot of injuries, like you mentioned, but it's not an excuse to lose to the winless Lions.
And Will, the NFL has been so crazy this year with the amount of parity, and you really never know what's going to happen week to week. As the Steelers, as Ty mentioned, were unable to beat the Lions this year as they tied them. And with the Vikings loss on Sunday, you mentioned how the fan base is, obviously upset right now. So is that really what the overall feeling? You mentioned a lot of close games, a lot of losses that were close. What's the fan base? How do they feel about this Vikings team right now?
Well, I think there's just a general kind of frustration with the what ifs of this season. I mean, the Vikings are 5-7 right now, but you look at some of the advanced stats, and they should be better than they are. I mean, early on, they started the season with an overtime loss to the Bengals that they could have easily won. Dalvin Cook fumbled in that game. Then against the Cardinals, who currently are 10-2, have the best record in the league, they were a 38-yard Greg Joseph field goal away from winning that game. So it's a team that plays up and down to their competition. Looks like they could beat anybody on a given week. They beat the Packers, who are 9-3, but they could also lose to anybody on a given week. I mean, they just lost to the Lions, and they lost to the Cooper Rush Cowboys earlier this year when Dak Prescott was out. So I think fans are just frustrated with this kind of inability to win games they should, when you see them playing so well against good teams, and you kind of see the potential that's there on both sides of the ball. But I mean, we're coming up. This is the fourth year of the Kirk Cousins era in Minnesota, and it's looking like only one of those seasons is going to end with a playoff berth, assuming this one doesn't. So it's getting close to time where there might be some major changes to the leadership structure here.
All right. Speaking of Cousins, he has had an impressive year with a 25-3 interception, touchdown interception ratio, and he has 100.63 passer rating, which would be second best of his career. How do you think he's doing? And Do you think he has a future in Minnesota beyond this year?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic because you just gave some of the numbers. The numbers are really good. You look at any of his statistics and you think, okay, this guy's a top 5 quarterback, top 10 at least. He's number 2 graded quarterback in the league by PFF, things like that. And then you look at the record and they're 5-7 and it doesn't really add up. And some of the issues this year with kind of the stats and the record not adding up is earlier in the season, I thought there were a lot of times where Cousins was too conservative and he was just kind of checking it down, not giving Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen chances to make plays. So the numbers look good in that regard sometimes, but I thought he was being a little too conservative. He's been better of late, but yeah, it's bizarre how great his numbers are and how it just has not led to winning. And that's not just this year for Cousins. I mean, he has one of the, I think it's like a top 10, top 15 passer rating of all time. And he's the only one on that entire top 15 list with a losing record in his career. Most of the other guys are 40, 50 games above 500 or more than that in like Tom Brady's of the world. So yeah, it's a conundrum. And Cousins is a very talented quarterback. He can make all the throws. Obviously, I mean, Justin Jefferson's having a great start to his career in large part because of Cousins, but his cap hit goes up to $45 million next year. It's like 31 right now, and that is a big number. So if they start to make changes to maybe firing Zimmer, maybe firing GM Rick Spielman, then I think you got to think about trying to find a team that'll trade for Cousins, because I'm sure there's a team out there that, especially if the Vikings are willing to take on a little bit of his $35 million salary, that would talk themselves into him being a big upgrade. I don't know whether it's the Broncos or I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of QB shuffling this offseason potentially. So we'll see. And even these last 5 games of the season could go a long way in determining what happens next year for the Vikings.
Yeah, and you mentioned Justin Jefferson, who has really allowed Vikings fans to not really feel mad at the fact they had to trade away Stephon Diggs. He's the best, one of the best. I think he's honestly in my top 5. He's recorded 78 receptions for 1,209 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging 15.5 yards per reception. And Pro Football Focus has him with this. No receiver has had he's had 68 receptions of 15 plus yards since 2020, rather. And no other receiver has 56. And Jefferson's, the possible assignment for Jefferson is Joe Hayden, who's coming off an injury, but also the Vikings receivers corps with Adam Thielen. He's hurt and he will not play in this game. So how will the Vikings attack this kind of hit or miss Steelers secondary?
Yeah, and I want to say I don't think Hayden's playing tomorrow. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but I want
to. Hayden's out. Yeah, he's out for the 4 straight.
So it's Sutton and Witherspoon, I believe.
Yeah, Sutton and Witherspoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe Pierre if they feel like playing him.
Okay. Yeah, so the Vikings are without Thielen, so their number 2 is going to be KJ Osborne, which we'll see. I mean, I think defenses should just start double teaming Jefferson every play basically until that doesn't work for whatever reason, because the Lions didn't really do it last week and he torched Amani Oruwariye for 182 receiving yards. Jefferson is just on a different level right now. I mean, he's averaging 144 yards per game over his last 4. He's got the most receiving yards over a 4-game stretch in Vikings history, which includes names like Randy Moss and Chris Carter. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. And yeah, you said this, you think he's top 5. I think he's got a really good argument to be top 3 right now when you just look at the numbers he's putting up and the way he's doing it with his route running and his contested catch ability. He's been everything the Vikings could have ever imagined they were getting in a first-round receiver last year to replace Diggs. And he's been fun to watch. He's the main silver lining of what was a disappointing 7-9 year last year and another disappointing season so far this year.
And like Jefferson, the Vikings have a premier player at running back with Dalvin Cook, but he's questionable for tomorrow night with a shoulder injury. Do you think he'll be able to go tomorrow? And if not, how do you think Alexander Mattison will do against the Steelers' run defense? Yeah,
I'm skeptical about Cook playing. He tore his labrum in his shoulder, dislocated his shoulder against the 49ers just 2 weeks ago. So like 10 days ago at this point. Wasn't able to play this past week. I guess I've heard it's just like a pain management issue for Cook. They don't think there's much re-injury risk. And he's a tough guy. It's basically a must-win game for the Vikings' playoff hopes. So maybe he guts it out and plays, but I think it would probably be smart to hold him out again just with the short week and then give him another 10, 11 days. The Vikings next play on Monday Night Football against the Bears in week 14. Or week 15 at this point, I think. Yeah. But Madison has proven to be a really capable replacement. I mean, in 3 starts this year, he's gone well over 100 yards from scrimmage in every game. He's a really powerful runner. He doesn't have the same like elite vision that Cook has. I think that's what makes Cook so great is his vision and his kind of decisiveness. We see Madison miss some holes occasionally, but super physical runner, a great athlete, can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I don't know a ton about the Steelers' run defense, but the numbers indicate it hasn't been great. So I would anticipate another solid game for Madison.
All right, the Vikings will be without. He's a rookie, right? Christian Darrisaw. Okay, I thought he was the second round, but he is a rookie. Christian Darrisaw for your left tackle. And how do you think Brian McNeil will match up with T.J. Watt? Because he had 3 sacks against the Ravens. How do you think the offensive line has performed this season? Do you think that's part of the reason why the team has underachieved a little bit this year?
Yeah, the offensive line has been an issue in Minnesota for basically as long as I can remember. I think their last really good offensive line was in like 2009 or something. It's always been an issue. But their best player on the offensive line is their right tackle, Brian O'Neill, which bodes well for a matchup with TJ Watt because I think Watt kind of almost exclusively plays on that side. So that'll be good. The issue is the other side with Darrisaw, their first round pick this year. He's missed the last couple games. He missed last week and he's out again this week. So they've been shuffling all kinds of things. Last week they moved their starting right guard Oli Udoh out to left tackle for some reason, and it didn't work great. So it'll either be Udoh or their veteran backup Rashad Hill at left tackle. Either way, not a player who inspires much confidence. And the interior has also been a little shaky. Garrett Bradbury was their first round pick in 2019 at center, and he just has not really put it together at all in his career in terms of being able to anchor against big defensive tackles like Cameron Hayward. So, yeah, the Watt and Hayward, I think, are the 2 primary concerns by far on the Steelers defense. I mean, I think that would be true against anybody, but especially against the Vikings kind of suspect offensive line. If they are dominating and wrecking this game and not giving Kirk Cousins time to find Jefferson downfield, it could be a long day.
And Will, they struggled against the Lions. I think I saw they gave up like 3 sacks or something. And the Lions pass rush isn't known to be, like one of the best in the league.
Yeah. I mean, the Lions' best pass rusher is like Charles Harris, if you even heard of him. I mean, you guys played him, but yeah, Harris had 2 sacks. They had one where he just beat Udoh and had a strip sack on Cousins. That was a big play in the first half. Another where the Vikings, for some reason, put a tight end on him and he got beat for a sack. So yeah, it's been a bit of an issue this year. Interestingly, I think these are the top 2 teams in the NFL just in terms of sack numbers this year. I think the Steelers lead the league and the Vikings are right behind, but the Vikings pass rush is without their top 2 defensive ends. Danielle Hunter was lost for the season earlier this year, and Everson Griffin is out as well. So we'll see. The Steelers, I think, have a pretty significant advantage in terms of the pass rush in this game.
Yeah, and that story about Everson Griffin is just absolutely scary. When you think about that, there's a possibility that the Steelers may be dealing with a very similar situation in Stephon Tuitt, and then you think back to was it Belcher from Kansas City? Just anytime that you see like a mental health issue, it's just very, very, very scary.
Yeah, it is. It was a really scary morning and a whole day when the Griffin story came out. But really glad that he kind of was able to get past it and get the help he needs. And he posted on Instagram this past weekend talking about how he has bipolar disorder and He's done fighting it, and he's not ashamed of it, and he really wants to get the help that he needs. So it's a really great thing because he was the longest tenured player on this team. The Vikings drafted him all the way back in 2010. Just a great person, great player. So really hoping for the best for him. I don't know if we'll see him again this season, but definitely a secondary concern to how he's doing as a person.
And now let's talk about we mentioned about 2 that they're missing. Let's talk about the other, 14 or so Vikings that have been credited with at least half a sack so far this season. Who has stepped up on the defensive line in those absences, and how do you think they'll match up against the Steelers offensive line that we mentioned the secondary was up and down at times? So is the offensive line. It's the definition of up and down.
Yeah, the Vikings are thin at defensive end right now. As I mentioned, DJ Wanham, a 4th-round pick last year who hasn't really shown much, is going to get a lot of time. He's a good athlete, but he just hasn't been able to kind of win those one-on-one pass rushes consistently enough. Where they do have both of their top players back right now is at defensive tackle, where they've got Dalvin Tomlinson and Michael Pierce. They kind of use 2 nose tackles in the middle of their 4-3 to try to slow down the run, which will be important against Najee Harris. Tomlinson is listed as the 3 technique, but he's basically just another nose tackle. But both of those guys do have a little bit more pass rushing juice than you might expect out of your average nose tackle. Pierce had a 2-sack game against the Bengals to open the season. So those are 2 guys to watch. Some other edge rushers, they've got Kenny Willekes, was a 7th-round pick last year, who's been kind of a pleasant surprise out of Michigan State. They've got a few other guys. Sheldon Richardson is a defensive tackle who they've kind of moved to defensive end. He's a veteran, been around for a long time. And then really the best way that the Vikings get pressure is with blitzes. I mean, Mike Zimmer, a lot of fans don't love him as a head coach right now, but there's no denying that he is a really, really good defensive game planner and defensive schemer. His pressure packages, his blitzes are always among the best in the league. And that's why the Vikings are always have a great 3rd down defense. So they'll bring Harrison Smith on blitzes. They'll bring their linebackers. They'll have Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr kind of in the double A gap mug look that Zimmer kind of invented. So that's going to be their best way to get pressure on Roethlisberger is by blitzing him. And if they're not blitzing like we saw against the Lions last week, it's hard for them to get pressure with just 4.
And at linebacker, the Vikings will have their duo of Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr back. Kendricks has always been a really solid linebacker with Vikings. Obviously, like not having them against Detroit was huge. How noticeable was it in this game?
Yeah, it was super noticeable. I mean, they were playing Nick Vigil, who's kind of a journeyman veteran, was their top linebacker, and they had a couple just backup caliber guys in there as well. And you could tell, I mean, there were some missed tackles. There were some poor run fits, poor coverage and short stuff. So Kendricks, I mean, is just a phenomenal player. I think he's the Vikings' best defensive player, at least, especially with Danielle Hunter out. Harrison Smith is great too, but Kendricks I think he's the best coverage linebacker in the NFL. And trying to be unbiased there, but I mean, some of the interceptions that he has this year, he looks like a wide receiver. Like he can run with tight ends like Pat Freiermuth. He'll be a big asset against Najee Harris in the pass game. So getting Kendricks back is absolutely massive. And Barr's good player as well. He's been around for a really long time, knows the defense, big guy. So he can be used in a lot of ways as a blitzer or in run defense. So yeah, getting those 2 guys back is huge for this game, and getting Patrick Peterson back as well, their top cornerback.
All right. Speaking of Peterson, he is coming back, but how do you feel about the rest of the Minnesota secondary? Because I saw a stat today that said, for what it's worth, I don't know how much of a PFF guy you are. They said their man-to-man skills have been shaky.
Yeah. Yeah. PFF has not been super fond of the Vikings corners this year. And I think that's fair for the most part. I've been impressed with Peterson. I mean, he's 31 years old or 30, 10th, 11th year in the league. Obviously, he's not the player that he was when he was with the Cardinals, and he was an insane athlete when he was younger. But I mean, he's a future Hall of Famer for a reason. Like he's extremely smart. His technique is great. And offensive just kind of mostly been avoiding throwing to him because the Vikings' other options are shaky. Bashad Breeland was an offseason pickup for them. He's been really up and down, and more down than up this season. Cameron Dantzler is a young second-year player who's been up and down as well. So getting Peterson back is huge. He's their top guy. He's a captain, just an important leader on that defense. And I imagine he's not shadowing anybody this year, but I mean, he'll see a lot of Deontay Johnson or Chase Claypool, whoever it may be. It's kind of the other side of the field from Peterson that's the bigger concern for the Vikings, whether it's Breeland or Dantzler.
All right, so I want to hear this. You mentioned the third down defense for the Vikings. That's one thing. The Steelers kind of had a little bit of a trouble against the Ravens and some trouble over the course of this season. So I want to know, what's your keys to the game, and who do you think will have a big game for the Vikings?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of touched on all the matchups here, but the big key obviously is not letting TJ Watt and Cam Hayward kind of just wreck things on the offense, giving Cousins a little bit of time to find Justin Jefferson, find KJ Osborne down the field, and defensively just getting after Roethlisberger and forcing some turnovers. I mean, Roethlisberger, I was looking on PFF. He leads the league in turnover-worthy plays, is a stat they have. And just watching like last week's game against the Ravens, there were a bunch of balls that were kind of tipped around, and the Ravens weren't able to secure him. So the Vikings should have some opportunities to get an interception or two, and they need to take advantage of those because I think it's going to be kind of tough for them to get pressure without blitzing. As far as who will have a big game, I think Kendricks is always a player to watch. Eric Kendricks. Just with his versatility, and he's going to be fired up after missing that Lions loss. And then it's kind of too easy to say Justin Jefferson, but he is just red hot right now. I will say keep an eye out on KJ Osborne as well, filling in for Thielen as the number 2 receiver. He's been impressive this year. He's taken a lot of strides from his rookie year last year, and just a solid receiver. So yeah, those would be a few guys to watch.
And Will, do you have a prediction for the game?
Yeah, I haven't written my official prediction yet, but I don't. It's hard for me to feel confident at all in this Vikings team. I mean, obviously they're coming off a loss to the Lions, but I just have a weird feeling it would be very, very Vikings-like to pull out a win in this game and kind of get their fans having some hope again, only to then have that come crashing down next Monday night in Chicago or sometime in the future. So I do not feel confident in it whatsoever, but I'll pick the Vikings to win what I'm sure will be another dramatic, close game, probably decided by a field goal or going to overtime or something.
All right, this last question, we skimmed over it a little bit earlier. Do you think Mike Zimmer is gone after the season? And also, who do you think should be the best replacement for him? They had Chat Sports. I don't know if you're familiar. They had Brian Dable from Buffalo. You think that'd be a good option?
That's an interesting one. To answer your first question, I do think Zimmer is gone after this year. I mean, there's a possibility that they turn things around in these last 5 games and they sneak into the playoffs or whatever. I mean, they're only 1 game back of Washington and San Francisco in the 6 and 7 seeds, so it's possible. But I kind of feel like they shouldn't base their decision on whether they do that or not. That was kind of what happened in 2019. There was some rumors about Zimmer's job security. Then they made the playoffs. They beat the Saints in the wild card round, and Zimmer stayed. I kind of feel like you just have to move on. It just hasn't been working well enough. They've only got 3 playoff appearances in his first 7 seasons, and could be 3 and 8 if they don't turn things around this year. He's a good defensive coordinator, and he's been a good head coach, but they've had a lot of instability on offense. He's had game management issues with things like clock management and timeouts and things like that. And then the defense just hasn't been good enough in recent weeks. So, yeah, I think Zimmer is probably gone. And Brian Dable is a good potential replacement. Byron Leftwich, the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, I think they need to go after an offensive guy. which is usually what happens when you move on from a defensive head coach. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting ones out there. Kellen Moore of the Cowboys. I'm sure there are a bunch of other names I'm forgetting right now, but those are a few of the ones that would be at the top of the list, I think.
Yeah, I found it telling about a guy's job security when former Vikings coach Mike Tice had some words about it. And I'm like, considering the way that Mike Tice left the Minnesota Vikings, if you remember the Love Boat, that's not good job security by any stretch of the means. Yeah,
that was a pretty funny tweet when Tice said, "Yeah, even my sorry ass never lost to the Lions," which is true. He went 8-0 against them.
I can't deny that. But one player we want to focus on is Jordan Berry. Now, it's tough to be a punter in Heinz Field, especially with the wind going around there. So I think we've been hard on him with this podcast. We've had people on who follow the Steelers that have been hard with him. But I've seen that he's been much more successful in U.S. Bank Stadium field. Just talk about his performance so far this year.
Yeah, I honestly forgot. I love a good revenge game narrative. So we got the Jordan Berry revenge game tomorrow. I'm expecting some dimes inside the 10, although hopefully not too many for the Vikings. But yeah, he's been good this year. I mean, I can't really say I've noticed him that much, which I think is a good thing for your punter. He's not out here making spectacular 65-yard punts or anything like that, but he's been reliable. I mean, he's got a good net, good hang time. I can't think of any big punt returns they've given up. So yeah, I definitely think coming from an outdoor tough weather spot like that to playing half your games in the Vikings indoor stadium would help anybody. And yeah, he's been solid.
And that was Will Ragatz. He covers the Vikings for Sports Illustrated. Will, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. A lot of fun.
Still mad at myself over that. And he said he didn't give an exact score prediction, but he did say Vikings by a field goal. Now, again, I'm in the guts stage of the season where it's I'm willing to pick against the Steelers. And I think that it kind of lines up to a get-back game for the Vikings. Losing against the Lions. Mike Zimmer's on the hot seat. Mike Tice is out there talking trash, 8-0 as a Vikings head coach against the Lions. And when you hit us with that stat, you can't really blame him for saying that. So, Chris, I say my prediction is going to be I'm going to say 27-21 Vikings at this point, but I am confident that the Steelers can pull this off.
This is a tough game to pick because the Vikings they lost to the Lions on that last play of the game, and the Steelers, I mean, their backs were up against the wall there. They needed that win against the Ravens. They always get up for games against the Ravens, and it was at Heinz Field. So I could, like you mentioned, I could easily see them falling here. But I think I have the Steelers winning just because I think they're gonna not having Thielen out there is gonna be, and Cook. I think Cook might not play as Will said. He doesn't think he's gonna. I think those two players not playing is really gonna hurt the Vikings. So I don't have the Steelers. I think Deontay Johnson's gonna have another big game. I think TJ Watt should do what he normally does. He's having an incredible. Everybody thinks he should break that sack record. He's on pace. He's hungry for it and everything. But I have the Steelers winning. I'll say 24-17. I think it'll be a close game. Like Will mentioned, all the Vikings games are close.
Yeah. Yeah, and Brandon's having a little bit of troubles right now trying to get back into the StreamYard right now. But so I guess we'll also put it down there. If the Steelers win, I do agree. I think Deontay Johnson has another big game for the Steelers. He's kind of firmly placed himself as the number one receiver for the Steelers. And while we're still kind of waiting up for Brandon right here, if there's one thing that I want to talk about real quick before we get him back in. I'm just gonna allow him to rejoin the stream if he gets the opportunity. I want to talk about James Washington, and I've been seeing a lot of this with the Steelers fans. James Washington has kind of, lost the graces of most of the Steelers nation, and he was known as a fan favorite at the time, but with how he's performed, there was a little bit of a catch from CBS in which Ben was talking to Washington, and it didn't exactly seem like the most friendly conversation. It seemed like a "come on, let's go" type of conversation.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what that was about. I wasn't sure. I know the receivers coach, Hillier, was right there next to him. I really didn't know what the whole details was at, but I did see that.
Yeah, it was a very weird conversation. Now that we have Brandon back in here, Brandon, so just to give you a little bit of an update, I said 27-21 Vikings. Chris said 24-17 Steelers.
Okay. This is a dangerous game. This is very dangerous. Because I got some what he said, and I said in the Ravens recap that he's fighting for his job. And when people are fighting for their jobs, it can go either way. The team might start pressing and make mistakes and be reckless, or they're going to come in and fight and avoid embarrassment. So I'm going to go. It's usually hard for road teams on Thursday nights. So for that reason, I don't know. Now, I'm gonna be honest.
They don't have Cook and Thielen.
I have a funny feeling that the Vikings are going to pull this one out.
I wouldn't be surprised either. The Steelers, they did win that game.
Another close game. I could be wrong about this, so I'm willing to own it if the Steelers win. I'll pick the Vikings to win 23-20.
It's going to be close, I think. I mean, all these games, a lot of the Steelers games, a lot of the Vikings, they're just all go down to the wire. And, the Steelers, they won that game against the Ravens. They played pretty well defensively, but they did give up a touchdown late there. And, if Lamar Jackson puts that ball where it needs to be, they end up losing that game. So, I mean, they did. The Vikings did lose to the Lions, but they were without some key players. I think three of their main starters were out.
And plus, you're playing a physical game with the Ravens, and you're playing a short week. That's tough.
Yeah,
you don't realize that after the Steelers Ravens games, they don't. 60% of the time, they don't go too well.
Yeah,
The week after,
the schedule definitely didn't do them no favors scheduling a Thursday night game after a Ravens game. But man, they're gonna have their hands full with Jefferson though. He's been doing a lot of great things there in Minnesota.
But if the Steelers going to win this game, it's going to be Deontay Johnson. I think Deontay Johnson is going to have another big game. And you know who's going to burn? Breland.
He's going
to.
Yeah, I mean,
you know how.
The former Washington. What PFF, they say their corner's not that very good in man coverage, and Peterson's still a good player, but he's older. He's up there in age. He's not as what he once was. So maybe that's with the Steelers' advantage there with Deontay Johnson, and hopefully maybe Claypool makes a big play. I know he's been dealing with that toe injury.
Yeah, but I think the question with the Vikings is who is Peterson going to primarily cover, because he is the de facto number one corner in Minnesota. So you'd think he'd go on Johnson, but they might want to put size on size and put him against Claypool. So it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Zimmer does there. And as we mentioned, a strong defensive coordinator. We remember him from the times in which he was the Bengals defensive coordinator. That's how he got his job out there in Minnesota. So you expect to see the Vikings defense to come up big for this game. Again, second in sacks right behind the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think this is probably going to be another litmus test game for the offensive line. And one guy that I want to look out for is it looks like Banner is going to be playing. So I want to see how he can handle that, because that'll be his first full game as a right tackle in the NFL since week 1 against the Giants last year.
So he's been out for about 15 months.
Better part of it. So that's one thing I wanted to say. But John LeGlue did pretty good against the Ravens, so I guess they're going to trust him in a short week, and you never know. Maybe they find another guy. Maybe they find a guy that they can have as their bargain guard out there. So it's going to be interesting to see that entire situation. So that's the one group that I expect to step up for the Steelers, in addition to Deontay Johnson, just to differentiate it from the rest of you guys.
Yeah, Claypool. So how do you feel about the matchup between Brian O'Neill and Watt? Do you think he's going to have... I wanted to mention this because I saw an article on, I think it was The Athletic or CBS Sports. Do you think TJ Watt deserves MVP? Because I do. I'm not talking defensive player. I'm talking about MVP of the league.
That's a $1 million question, but that's basically a de facto offensive award every time. I wonder when's the last time that there has been like a guy that was like finished at least third in MVP voting and was a defensive player. If it was recent, it had to be Aaron Donald.
But who's the MVP candidate right now? Because Watt has to be in consideration. Say the Steelers actually make the playoffs, and he's breaking the sack record the way he's going. Obliterates the sack record. Say he winds up with 25. You got to give it to him, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, the last defensive player of the year was Lawrence Taylor in 85 or
86.
86, yeah. So, yeah, definitely. They love giving it to the quarterbacks, and that's where all the betting odds right now have, they all think it's going to be. A lot of people think Tom Brady, actually.
It was Lawrence Taylor who was the last defensive player to win the MVP in 1986. And it's only happened twice since the award was introduced in 1957.
And the other one was Alan Page. I don't know the year.
Alan Page, a Minnesota Viking.
Yep.
So I guess the stars sort of align in that situation when you look at it that way. But I think I'm trying to think, has there been a definitive quarterback out there that has staked claim to the MVP? It would be Derrick Henry if he was still healthy and available for the Titans. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, Kyler Murray was it, but he got hurt, and Colt McCoy went 2 for 1. Sorry, 2 for 3, 2 and 1, and Jonathan Taylor's probably gonna get the offensive. If he could get to, I think Taylor might get the offensive player or MVP if the Colts make it to the playoffs, and he gets 2,000.
He's gonna get the rushing title. I know that.
I mean, he might break the rushing record.
Yeah,
where he's going.
That's a name to watch out for, Taylor. But the Steelers have to make the playoffs. I don't think they'll give him MVP if they don't.
I think he's a lock for Defensive Player of the Year. This should be his first Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yeah,
I think so too. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we said that. That's why I said MVP.
Yeah, MVP. That's a high criteria to reach.
Plus.
Who's the MVP league MVP?
Plus, he's been hurt as well, so you have to also look at it like that.
Yeah.
Who's the last MVP that didn't have their team make the playoffs?
Only twice has the award gone to league MVP for a player whose team did not make the playoffs. In 1967, it was the Baltimore Colts, Johnny Unitas, and in 1973. With the Buffalo Bills with O.J. Simpson.
Oh, yes.
And also, I think another one might have been J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt, MVP. J.J. Watt didn't win that, so excuse me. So, yeah. So, the last two to make it to not make it to the playoffs, Johnny Unitas and O.J. Simpson.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, so I think that tells you everything. Plus, with the quarterbacks being favored a lot, that's what needs to happen to really even kind of be considered.
All right, so it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers do on Thursday against the Minnesota Vikings. Game on NFL Network, and also will be on the local Pittsburgh station as well. And that's all for us. For Chris Ward and Brandon Walker, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. We will be on a mini hiatus. We will have a recap of this game coming to you. We'll have the live Twitter feed on Monday. We'll also talk about the playoff picture at that moment, because it's going to be a very interesting week. As always in the NFL, a ton of parity in this league, but we'll see if the Steelers could potentially get one of those wild card playoff seeds when the dust all settles on Sunday and also Monday. So until then, stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at @RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on renegadeblitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Renegade Blitz podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts.